All right, well, welcome everybody to Shane and Gray's Brokers in Focus. We're actually thinking about calling it
50 Shades of Grey.
What do you think?
I like it. I like the tone of it. 50 Shades of Grey. I think it's, I don't know.
Maybe
It's
the world
different.
could use 50 of me. I don't know.
Oh God. 50 Shades of Grey. I don't know. We'll ask our viewers and see what they think. If you guys would like for us to call it the Gray and Shane Show, or Shane and Gray Brokers in Focus, or the 50 Shades of Grey, we'll take a vote. What do you think?
Yeah, leave it to them.
Um,
So I guess first off, I'll introduce myself. I'm Shane Cox. I'm the broker in charge of our E.R.A. Strother Sanford office. My real estate career began back in around 2002. 11 years as a real estate agent, working for another firm. Then I came down to work with E.R.A. Strother in a broker in charge capacity. And my office is there on Steel Street in downtown Sanford.
And I'm Gray Hernandez. I'm originally from Los Angeles. I was a property manager before becoming a real estate agent. I've been doing business here as a broker in the Fayetteville area for about 7, going on to 8 years now. And the purpose of the show is to basically give our viewers insight on what it's like to do business in North Carolina, real estate trends for buyers, sellers, and even real estate agents. If you're new to real estate, if you want to see what goes on in the real estate market, if you're thinking about getting into the business and what it's really like. So we decided to, we've always had a lot of stories, fun stories, educational stories, and we figure, hey, why not? Why not let the world know, what it's like to do business in North Carolina? I sound like a newscaster.
Also, at times, I think it'd be a fun thing to share. We do take several trips throughout the year. I think our most recent, we just got back from Miami.
Good times.
At M Connect down there, and whether it's some fun things to do or just being spot on with learning and educating.
Yep.
But always something to bring back. We got some great tales we could.
Yes, absolutely. For today's show, the things that you can expect, obviously, are insights, market trends, where the market is heading, and these are all of our opinions, and what it's like to be a real estate agent. I know it varies by state to state, but of course we have, we still follow the same standards. So I think we can, safe to say that if you're thinking about getting into real estate, maybe you should tune in. And also, if you're a buyer and seller, we'll be giving a lot of tips on what it would be like to sell a house in North Carolina and what it's like to buy a house in North Carolina.
Exactly.
I think our first topic for today is obviously the most anticipated buyer agency agreement that's going to be in effect nationwide. I believe it's August 17th. Our MLS here in Fayetteville, though, they're doing rollout is August 1st. So I want to hear from a broker in charge standpoint on what this means for a buyer, for a seller, and obviously for buyer agents and also for listing agents, because this does not have, it's not something that's going to affect only in our state, but nationwide. So what does that mean for you? Now, before you can even show homes as of August 1st here in our here in our market, you have to have a buyer agency agreement. We've talked about who's going to police if you have a buyer agency agreement in place. And what do you think about that?
Right. Well, just to kind of catch up anybody that's local to the area or not in the area. With the 50 states of the United States, only 13 states practice buyer agency. And North Carolina being one of those states, each one of those states does it a little different. And North Carolina has always prepared itself, I think, a little better than several of the other states have. So some of these changes that we hear coming down, we've already been doing. It's already been in the linings of what we do. Some states, I think, if they state, this is my commission to sell your home, it's just left at that. But in North Carolina, we've always kind of walked it out and explained how that gets broken down. We have our fee, what fee goes to the sub-agent or buyer's agent. So that's always been, pretty transparent.
But I think, though, even though we've always had those agreements in place, we've never really enforced it. There's several occasions where brokers or provisional brokers, for example, if the buyer decides that they no longer want to continue on with the house, but you've worked up until day of closing, you know, what happens? Am I just shit out of luck? Like, do I not get paid? I mean, we've never enforced it. I think more than ever now, enforcing those rules really helps establish we are not going to work for free, right? So with that said, you know, if you are a buyer, a couple of the things that you would need to prepare, obviously, because this is going to roll out, I mean, effective in August. Obviously, your closing costs would be your expenses. And now, if the seller decides that they don't want to pay for any commission, you're going to either do unrepresented, which you represent yourself, or you're going to have to pay your own agent to do what it takes to get you in the house. And this is why it's different. You know, in most states are panicking because they've never had buyer agency agreement in the past. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean for an agent? I mean, I know what it means for me, but a lot of people are a little on this, you know. We've always had the buyer agency agreement. It was just, we didn't really enforce it. Because in the past, in the MLS, it always states how much is the compensation, right?
Yep, and it states in there that it must be filled out at least by the time of making an offer if you're representing the buyer. So that's something that you did see pretty common out there, especially I saw that with newer agents. Sometimes you saw it in bad habits of more seasoned agents. But at the time of writing the offer, they would go ahead and take care of the buyer agency agreement, which they've already been representing this buyer for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But at this time, with this change, the buyer agency agreement will have to be filled out in full and explained and understood before taking a client through a home.
Now, there was, when we had our, what was that, event that we went to last week at the Coliseum? Somebody asked,
Correct.
like, who's going to police it? Who's going to know if we have a buyer agency agreement in place? I mean, the way I see it, if you want to work for free, if you want to take someone around in your car not knowing if they're going to be able to pay your commission or your compensation, that would be a you decision whether you want to do that, right? Because a lot of people don't understand what it takes to become a buyer agent. I mean, the first thing you got to do is research the property, look for any kind of covenants. You know, you do your due diligence before you go out and start showing.
Right.
But that means your clock starts there, not by the time you get out of the car. It starts at the time of research of the property. And that's something that we've never really, you know, thought of, like, hey, wait a minute, I am already on the clock. So, I don't know. I think it's a good thing. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to take about, 2 years, really, for buyers to really understand and have a full grasp that this is going to be the norm now.
Because what we've seen in the past, you know, we've always had to present the working with real estate agents at first substantial contact. So buyer shows up at a home, whether it's on the fly or they come to your office. Usually it's just meet you at the property at 4 and you show up, they show up. Before you take them through the home, you're supposed to explain
right.
buyer's agency, seller's agency, and dual agency. And, you know, it states right on there, this is not a contract. And you have to go over it with them, and you're supposed to get their signature. And so many times you see a buyer
refuse to sign it.
Yeah, with really, hesitant to, hey, I don't want to sign anything yet. And you're like, as you can see here, it says this is not a contract. And if they don't want to sign that, you know, we're highly encouraged just to write on buyer refused to sign, and at least that covers us some. But especially now that at first contact you're going to be putting a buyer agency agreement in front of them with a fee before you go through the home.
So what does this mean if you are thinking about selling your house? If you decide to hire your own agent to represent you, it used to be that we were doing a co-broke compensation. And what that means is, for example, if he was a seller and I was trying to represent him, you know, I would collect X amount and I would say, hey, based on this percentage, I would decide how much I would give the person bringing someone to buy your house.
First, how did you know I'd choose you?
Because I am the awesome realtor. Anyway, so now going forward, I think because of the lawsuit, sellers may opt to not pay a buyer's agent. Is that in their best interest? I don't know. I mean, if you guys were the ones showing a buyer and knowing that there's no commission, if the buyer can't pay your compensation, I don't know, would you still show it? Would you still get in your car, drive how many miles? I don't know. I mean, it's definitely going to be something that's new, although we've been doing buyer agency in the past, but it's going to be new now because, you have to now negotiate what you're worth. And sellers, if they think that they can sell the house on their, I mean, I've heard a couple of sellers, and they're like, well, with all this new changes rolling out, I mean, I'm just not going to hire my own agent. I'll just, if that was the case, if no one's going to be showing my house, right? Well, I'll just pay the buyer agent. Like, why would I have my own representation? I can do this myself. I mean, you can always sell. You've always been able to sell a house by yourself, right?
You've always been able to, but I'll say that what is different is now we live in a very legally charged world.
Yeah.
To where you are always putting yourself out there at risk. And whereas when you're represented by a listing agent, we have all those North Carolina forms with all the language built in for those protections.
Now, oddly enough, though, certain states do not do dual agency. A certain scenario would be, well, I'm just going to go straight to the listing agent, right? Listing agent means the one that's listing the house. I just go straight there, so I don't have to pay for my own agent, Just know that in North Carolina, though, that listing agent, if he or she has no agreement with you, you are an unrepresented buyer. And that is going to be a fiasco. And let me tell you why. The fiduciary of that listing agent is to the sellers, which means, yes, she can tell you things that are odd. She has to be honest, right? But she can't tell you anything. She can't write the offer for you. She can't tell you, hey, when are you going to do your inspection? Oh, by the way, these are the inspectors I recommend. She can't do any of that. It's kind of like if you went to court and you were the defendant. I mean, she's not going to tell you, which investigators to hire, right? So that you can still keep suing her client. That's not how it works. Literally, listing agents dealing with unrepresented buyers, their hands are tied. It's like waiting for a train going off course, and there's nothing that she can do about it. And that's because she doesn't represent you.
And that actually takes us in reverse back to about the late 90s when buyer agency came into play in North Carolina and in other states where, we saw that the buyer needs representation. You need somebody out there negotiating on your behalf. And that's kind of where the birth of buyer's agents came in. And now, in a way, I can see where it's going to push buyers over to be unrepresented.
Now, you guys, we did mention dual agency. Both parties would have to agree that they are allowing you to be the dual agent. And in our case, in our firms, we do dual agency. And what that means is you represent both parties. Well, how can you do that effectively, right? You can't. You, at this point, you are a paper pusher.
That's what I've always considered. Once you go in the dual agency mode, you become the mailman.
That's right.
So you just take it from this person. Okay, thank you, Mr. Seller. Take it to the buyer. Thank you, Mr. Buyer. And just take it back and forth. There is no input. There is no...
Like my opinion, my advice. You can't absolutely do that because someone, some way, somehow, one person will always feel as though you've represented the other party better than you represent them. So, is it doable? Yeah, I've done it a couple of times. Would I do it? I don't want to. I really don't like dual agency.
And sometimes it's the situation that you fill out at the time. There are times when the seller just wants to sell and the buyer just wants to buy.
Yep.
That, if you are in a time where the seller wants to maximize the amount that he's going to, receive from the sale, but the buyer's trying to get the best deal he can, that's where you start to get some conflict in there. But generally the ones I've had, it was just the goal of the buyer wanted it, seller wanted to sell it, and it was just facilitating that. But there are many places that it could get you into somewhere you don't want to be.
Anyway, hey guys, welcome back. Before we move to our next segment, I just want to let you guys know that this podcast is sponsored by Landello.
Landello is our in-house mortgager. Sylvia DeBaca, she is bilingual, so whether you're English, Spanish, she can help you out. So maybe down in the information below, we can put her contact information, but give Landello a try. They're great. Okay,
so where were we? Oh, right. So buyers, again, you're not obligated to use an agent at all. Can you represent yourself in the court of law? Absolutely. But would you want to? I don't know. That's a you decision, right? Nobody can tell you that. If you can afford to pay representation to make sure that it's right, that you're not going to get sued, I mean, why not? But if you think you can do this on your own, again, if you're going to be the seller and there's a buyer coming in, a buyer agent that you're willing to compensate, that buyer's agent is not going to be able, it's not going to help you, pick out an attorney and whatever, because you're literally on your own. I mean, think of it as attorneys. Are they going to basically give the other person, the ammunition and how to beat that? They're not going to do that. No, right?
Right.
So, I don't know. I mean, what does that mean for agents now, for us? Especially in those states that do not practice buyer agency agreement. I think it's, it's something that's, I don't know.
Well, it's just like when it was, like I said, when it was introduced here in the around mid to late 90s. I came in 2002, so it was about the first year or two that they were actually starting to practice buyer agency. And a lot of agents were really freaking out because offices were so used to working with
a seller sub-agent?
Yeah, they are the listing agent, and then every other office out there was a sub-agent. So if they're out showing homes to buyers, they're actually working for the listing agent. So they felt like they had a whole team out there working on their behalf to get them the best,
right?
Money and everything. But then with buyer agency, they were like, hold on now this is my listing, and you're taking somebody in there that you're representing them, and we can't talk, we can't do all those things that's best for my seller. So there were a lot that really held on to sub-agency until the real estate commission cut it and said you had to let it go. So
one of the things I also want to bring up is we've always done a co-broke, and what we mean by co-broke is our compensation has always been advertised on the MLS. So literally it kind of, if I was to go show, let's say your listing, right? And it already says on the MLS what the compensation is. Yep. That compensation is set by the firm that he works for. And now that that's going to be gone, I've heard a lot of buyer agents that says, well, if he's able to secure, I don't know, let's just say 6%, right? If he's able to secure 6%, that's not fair that I'm only getting 2%. Buyer's agents.
It's irrelevant.
I know, exactly. So you guys got to stop thinking that. What he secured for the listing contract, that is the firm's employment. Like, that has nothing to do, that is none of your business. Whether they want to pay you 1%, 2%, 3%. I mean, if you're charging your buyer 3% on your contract with them, and you know that the house is only, the seller on that transaction is only willing to pay 1%, you can't get mad at that. You either collect it from somewhere else or you work for 1%. That's a you decision.
The way it's been up to when it's going to change, here very soon. What a buyer's agent is paid was advertised on the MLS data sheet. And when you see that amount and you schedule the showing and you take the person into the home, I mean, at that point, you're agreeing to what you're being paid.
Yeah.
What they make on their side of the sale is irrelevant.
Is none of your business.
Because you got to think also, I mean, in the world of a listing agent, you have a lot of marketing expenses that you're taking on.
That's right.
Also, you have the advantage. You secured the listing.
Right.
So there's value in that. You're giving something for the buyer's agents to sell that they didn't have to go out and find themselves. they can focus on the buyers while you focus on the listings. So, that is something I've seen. I have had people say that's unethical and all those things, but I'll tell you, my first night of real estate class back in 2001.
Oh my God, you're old.
2001. 2001. I still remember that first night. I can see teacher standing right there, and that's the first topic that she covered. So,
you guys, I mean, look. When because I play either whichever contract or clients I represent, right? I can wear the hat as a listing agent, and I can wear a hat as a buyer's agent. Sometimes the buyer's agent are always like, well, but I drove so many miles, and, I did this, and, you barely did anything. Like, all you did was put a sign in your yard. How do you know that? How do you know what it took for me to get this listing?
I guess that's the way they would market a home, right?
Right. How do you know what it took for me to get this listing? Like, you don't know how long I've been following up with this person. You don't know what kind of assistance I had to do. Like my contractors.
But there's other referral involved.
Right.
There's lots of sometimes how that listing comes about. That when the sale does happen, there's money that has to go back up the chain for the people that got it to you. And
you guys know professional photography, I mean, it's a minimum at least of $250. And that's just money that we, as part of our marketing expense. I mean, that's depending on the size of the house, and they can go higher, right? You add drones, by the end of the day, you can be up $500. And
you have people that go out and draws up the floor plan.
Yeah.
Someone you send out there to measure. Because if you report it, it has to be accurate, and most of these MLSs now have the field as required, so you get to fill that in. And professional photography is now considered the standard for National Association of Realtors.
So no more iPhones.
I do know professional photographers that do go in with their iPhones. They prefer it because they have the editing software that they can do all that. But still, nothing quite takes the place of a high grade professional camera.
Yeah. I mean, so it's going to be a very interesting August, I have to say. What this means is real estate agents, we have to answer our phones because people are going to be calling and asking, what is the compensation? Are there any going to be compensation? And the association has basically introduced.
Let's walk it through how that's going to work.
Okay.
So before, previously you print off the MLS sheet. That's the system for everybody out there, all that lingo, but that's the multiple listing system where we go to see all the advertised listings. We print that, and it shows clearly on the sheet what you as the buyer's agent is going to be paid, what percentage of the purchase price. Here in a couple of weeks, that will be pulled off of.
It's basically going to say zero.
The MLS data sheets. It'll just be a blank field. And so now what takes place?
So let's run down. So let's say he is the seller's agent. He represents a seller, and I now have a buyer, and I represent a buyer, right? And it is now August 1st. There is no more compensation on the MLS. My buyer says, I want to see this house, this house, this house, and that house. Well, how am I supposed to know how much I'm going to get paid?
Well, first of all, you filled out a buyer agency agreement with
Correct.
the buyer stating what your fee is. Who's responsible for it?
Correct.
Who's responsible?
Buyer.
The buyer is responsible for it. But, let's try to help that buyer out a little bit. Let's see if the listing agent is offering
some compensation
for this sale.
So now let's say we've got the buyer agency in place. We're ready to go. We're ready. Showtime, right? We're ready. Approval. Everything is good to go. Now he gives me a list of 5 houses, and what's going to happen is I am now going to be calling each listing agent to find out if there's any kind of compensation. So now I'm going to call Shane and say, hey, you're listing on 123 Sesame Street. Is there a co-broke on this? Is your firm offering any compensation, or is your seller offering any compensation? Mm-hmm. And what do you say to me?
I tell you, yes, they are. Actually, we're offering 2.6%. Or I say, actually, no, my seller is not offering anything for compensation to buyer's agents on the sale of this home.
Okay, so there's no commission, right?
Correct.
So what that means is my fiduciary to the buyer, just because there's no commission, it would be up to him to say, okay, forget it, I don't want to see it. I can't tell him, we can't look at that. There's no commission. That is completely against the rules. Even if there's no commission paid on that, me as a listing agent, I'm sorry, as a buyer's agent, I can't tell you, you know what, fuck it, we're not going to that house, there's no commission. I can't do that. I'm going to tell my buyer, hey, listen, they're not paying any commission, so just know that if you like this house, you're going to pay my compensation, right? If the buyer says, okay, yes, I still want to see it, or no, it was just kind of something that I saw online, maybe it's not even worth it. So literally, you'd have to have your buyer agree or disagree whether they still want to see it. You can't make that decision for them.
Again, as I said earlier, the way North Carolina has prepared itself through the years on the buyer agency agreement, let's just go back a year ago, 2 years ago. Let's go back 5 years ago. It states on there what the amount is that your fee is on the buyer agency agreement, with the following sentence, that they will seek this from the selling agent or seller.
Yep.
But in the event it's not paid, it's the responsibility of the buyer.
Right.
Yeah. So it's still, even going back that far, it's the same exact place as where we're at right now. So for us, again, that's why it's not so different, but it's just
It's
delivered a little different.
Yes, and having to really enforce it now, because, you know, and not just myself, you know, I'm sure other agents here can agree, right? Like,
Yep. There's another little piece to that. So additional form has surfaced here in the past, week and a half. And that is if you've spoken with your buyer that you're representing, that you'll be seeking 2.5%. And let's say you do schedule a home and you do make the offer, it is accepted, and that home is listed, or the seller is offering 3.4%. That is beyond the 2.5 that your agreement is with the buyer. You now have to initiate that form for the amount above 2.5, and you have to have your buyer sign off on that it's okay to receive it.
yeah.
Because that is above the fee that you originally had agreed to with them.
And, you know, guys, get with your own broker in charge, okay? If you have questions, obviously this is only a small segment. If I know
And as this stuff rolls out too, we're still learning
Right.
as it goes. You know, we just had the attorney for the North Carolina Association of Realtors the other day, and he still has his confusions. You know, he says it's
I can only imagine what it would be like in other states that don't practice buyer agent. Like, how fucked up would that be for them?
they're having to do everything that we've learned since my old man day of 2002 when I came in, all the way till now. You know, like I said, we're well practiced at this, but somebody that's got to come straight in to that, and all the new forms and explaining these fees, that's a lot.
And I got to tell you, I was very surprised that these, the verbiage on the buyer agency agreement has been around for a long time, I guess. Remember what the attorney said, that whoever created all our forms, how far advanced we are compared to other states. So it's just now a matter of enforcing it, to really make sure that we're compensated for the work that we do. You know, I don't know. You got anything else on this one?
I mean, I think that's it as far as. Well, I won't say that's it. There's still a lot. There's still a lot. There's so much in this, but
I know.
I think we've talked around enough of kind of what's going on with it. We're going to know more as this next week too comes up. Whether we we'll recap or give an update on that. So.
If you guys have any questions or comments, definitely drop them below, and we will try to answer them as, if we're not busy, I guess. I mean, I do have to run my own, and he's got an office to run, so as quickly as we can, I suppose. Right. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. I'm Gray Hernandez.
All right, I'm Shane Cox.
And this is the 50 Shades of Gray.
And use Lindello Mortgage.